Calling out to the wolf pack, this is Call of the Wild with Danielle Lewis coming at you from Port St. Lucie, Florida with, finally, the DNC class action lawsuit transcripts. You guys, I'm sorry this took so long to do. I'm not ashamed to admit that I bit off a little bit more than I could chew here. I actually work 7 nights a week, 365 nights a year, and right before I started doing these videos, the shit kind of hit the fan in my life. So dealing with all of that and putting this together was a monumental undertaking, and it's giving me a newfound respect for Jeff Waldorf and Kyle Kulinski and Mike Figueredo and Tim Black and Jimmy Dore, because they or one or two people helped them to do this every week. And to do this by myself was monumental, is the only word I can think to use for it. But if I have your forgiveness, I'd like to go ahead and get into this. Now, the DNC class action lawsuit is being presided over by the Honorable Judge William J. Zloch. Your Honor, thank you for presiding over this case. Sitting in for the plaintiffs is the very well-known Mr. Jared Beck. He will be speaking today. And sitting next to him are 3 unsung heroes. We have Mr. Cullin O'Brien, Mr. Antonio Hernandez, and Miss Beverly Virues. Thank you for bringing this case forward for the people. Sitting in for the defense will be Mr. Bruce Spiva speaking today, and sitting with him is Mr. Mark Karamanica. Now, after the niceties and the opening introductions, we jump right into opening statements, and the Honorable Judge Zloch lets the defense go first. So, from Mr. Spiva, quote, "Your Honor, just briefly, this is an action that was brought on as a political weapon against the DNC and its former chairperson, Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And it really threatens some serious First Amendment injury to the defendants, because the crux of the plaintiff's claims here that the DNC and Congresswoman Schultz purportedly breached an internal rule of the party in saying that on one hand, the party would remain neutral between the two candidates, and on the other hand, not doing so behind the scenes. That is the allegation." He continues, the court would basically have to tell the party that it couldn't change that rule, even though it's a discretionary rule that didn't need to be adopted to begin with. The court would have to find that these individuals were induced to give money to Senator Sanders on the basis that there would be this neutrality, that there purportedly was not, and that they wouldn't have, relying on that, given money otherwise. Now, of course, would you give money to someone that was lying to you if you found out they were lying to you? If you had given them a bunch of money, would you not take the proper course to get it back, to make sure that your rights are known? Yes, sir, that is the claim that we are bringing forth today. And Mr. Jared Beck comes out of this like a shining star. Quote, "Your Honor, we have been accused just now of wielding a political weapon. We've been accused of posing a threat to the First Amendment. But in fact, the First Amendment is not absolute, and the Supreme Court recognizes that again and again. And in fact, the First Amendment yields, on many occasions, to more ancient common law rights that precede even the founding of this republic. Freedom of speech and freedom of association are very, very important. But we also have the right to not be defrauded. We have the right to not be taken advantage of by a fiduciary. We have a right not to be deceived. There's no exception to those rights just because the fraudulent speech or the fraudulent conduct involved takes place in a political context. But that's what the defendants want you to conclude in this case. But if you concluded that, Your Honor, you would be in direct contravention of what the Supreme Court has said time and again." Now, my friends, this goes on for 5 more pages. And it is... Oh, I'm sorry. This goes on for 2 pages. And after these 2 pages, the judge has to stop proceedings for a moment. There's something going on in the background. "Let me interrupt you," says His Honor. "Sure, Mr. Beck, and I apologize. This is not your problem." His Honor addresses the spectators in the back of the room. "For those of you who are here as spectators, and there's at least one individual, maybe two, you are distracting the court with your show of exuberance in support of counsel's arguments. You might as well be doing somersaults or backflips in support of counsel's arguments. You are distracting me. So if you want to help your side and are here to support it, let me listen to the lawyer and stop distracting me. Guys, if you go in to watch this, the best thing you can possibly do is sit there with quiet dignity and listen intently, because these are our rights on the line here. And this judge needs to know exactly what he needs to rule on and exactly what both lawyers are saying, especially when we get back to Mr. Spiva. Now, Mr. Beck continues. Here we are. In the terms of the complaint, and in the terms of the allegations of the complaint, and specifically what the DNC did wrong, I just think the context of when this complaint was drafted is important. We drafted this complaint and filed it in June of 2016, which was before the DNC primary or the DNC convention in July. And at that time, the evidence that we had access to consisted of a set of documents that Your Honor referenced in the prefatory remarks that were released by a figure named Guccifer 2.0. The core document was released by that individual on that website, purports to be an internal DNC memorandum, which outlines a strategy for advancing Hillary Clinton to the nomination of the Democratic Party before the primaries had even gotten off the ground. And this was at a time, Bernie Sanders, I believe, had announced for about a month before this particular memo came out. But I think that's clear evidence of what the DNC's intent throughout the primary process. It was to leverage their connections with the media in order to advance Hillary Clinton's candidacy at the expense of everybody else. Subsequent to this memorandum being released into the public by Guccifer 2.0, many more documents have come into the public domain. We have a wealth of information that was released by WikiLeaks and that comes from emails from officials of the DNC, as well as the Hillary Clinton campaign, which really, I think, flesh out and fill in the details of this really seminal internal document that Guccifer released and which is pled in our complaint. It shows, these additional leaks have shown that the DNC officials participated in creating and disseminating media narratives to undermine Bernie Sanders and advance Hillary Clinton. It shows former DNC Chair Donna Brazile giving debate questions in advance to Hillary Clinton during the primaries. It shows the DNC at one point changing its donor policies specifically to favor Hillary Clinton. It shows the scheduling of debates to favor Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders. It shows, in general, the DNC pouring its considerable resources and relationships into propelling Hillary Clinton to the nomination. It shows the creation of an aura of inevitability of Hillary Clinton's candidacy, and that the DNC pushed into the media, essentially, in our view, crushing Bernie Sanders' campaign. It shows the DNC coordinating and taking direction from Hillary Clinton's campaign operatives, making hiring decisions on what Hillary Clinton's campaign was telling them, picking sides in the disputes between the candidates. I mean, there's one famous example of an alleged chair-throwing incident in Nevada, where instead of acting in an even and impartial manner, Debbie Wasserman Schultz immediately sided with the Hillary Clinton campaign. We'll stop right there, since that was a lie. We all saw the video. What happened in Nevada? Man picked up the chair out of pure frustration and anguish. And what happened? Everyone surrounded him, put down the chair, and they hugged it out. Because that's what we tree-hugging liberals do. We don't throw chairs if we can be stopped in our anguish from acting like the animals that you guys already are. We're not animals until we're pushed to being animals. But we can still find our heads and hug it out. Now, this is the part where it goes on for 5 pages. And Jared Beck is an absolute master of not only case law, but unalienable rights that we are endowed with as American citizens. Then the judge goes on to the defense, and he starts to ask the defense a bunch of questions about the DNC's internal workings. What does the DNC do as the head of the Democratic Party? Mr. Spiva, I mean, the DNC coordinates with the state and local parties. It supports the activities of candidates, Democratic candidates, the whole spiel of what they believe they think they do. The judge asked what type of involvement does the DNC have in the primaries and the state level. Mr. Spiva says the DNC, those are primarily dealt with state parties, state and local primary committees. There is some coordination between the DNC. The DNC obviously runs the convention. The judge asked, does the DNC help fund the state primaries? Mr. Spiva asked, do you mean literally? Spiva is very well coached. He speaks very well, but he was not very well informed about the DNC and their inner workings to be able to tell the judge. Maybe he thinks that because it's a private entity, the judge doesn't have to know about its internal dealings. So we come to it here. The thrust of the questions from the judge is, what does the DNC do? What kind of influence does it do in the states in electing the primary candidates that will go on to the national convention? Mr. Spiva, I see the thrust, Your Honor, but I'm not actually sure where Your Honor is going with this, to be honest. I'm sorry, I may just be being... And he stops. And the Honorable Judge Zloch goes, well, the plaintiff is alleging that the DNC on its own, and I'm going to paraphrase, but basically favored Hillary Clinton over Bernie Sanders. And so I'm asking you, that preference that the plaintiff alleges about the DNC, did that work its way down to the Democratic state primaries? Mr. Spiva, well, our position, Your Honor, is that there is no such preference. And certainly there was the Democratic National Committee did not, tell the state parties that it supported one candidate over the other. So if that answers your question, I mean, of course, we're going to step back and go into our subject matter jurisdiction here. Pause. We're going to subject matter jurisdiction. This is part of their entire defense, that the judge and the courts have no jurisdiction over what happens in the DNC. If you are a private entity and you are in the United States, whether you're nonprofit or for-profit, if you defraud people, you are answerable to our courts. We live in a country of law. So yes, you are going to speak and we are going to hear, and this judge is going to make his decision. But I won't get ahead of myself too fast. Now, at the end of this very long spiel about how the judge may not have jurisdiction to even hear the case, we come to a one-sentence summary of what every single one of it meant. Even if it were true, that's the business of the party and it's not justicable. Nothing to see here. Internal business of the party. Nothing to see here. Now, we go on to a piece of case law that Mr. Spiva mentions over and over again in his tirades, and that is the Wimes case, WYMBS versus the Republican State Executive Committee. This action was filed against the committee on January 31st, 1980 in the U.S. State's District Court. Count 1 of the complaint alleged that on equal protection grounds, the constitutionality of the method followed in determining the composition of the committee. Count 2 consisted of a similar challenge to the State Party Rule 11.4b, which provides the procedures for selecting and allocating the Florida delegates to the Republican National Convention. I'm just going to stop here for a second. Why is it always Florida? Do they really think they can get away with this? Because, I don't know, old people and drunk young people? I don't know. But no, you can't get away with this. We are going to continue to bring these cases forth because you can't mess with Florida as much as you think you can. Continuing. Now, Rule 11.4b, which was enacted by the committee in conformance with the National Party Rule 30A2, provides for the election of 3 delegates and 3 alternative delegates from each of Florida's 15 congressional districts. Pursuant to Party Rule 11.2, these delegates are allocated on a winner-take-all basis within each district. Since the number of registered Republicans varied significantly from one congressional district to the other, the appellees maintain that the practice of awarding an equal number of delegates to the winning candidate in each district on a winner-take-all basis amounts to a denial of equal protection to those voters residing in districts with large Republican populations. This case basically said they were saying that we are going to sacrifice the voice of the minority to protect the voice of the majority. The committee first sought dismissal of the action, just like in this case, the current case, but the motion was denied, and on March 19th, 1980, thereafter, the cross motions for summary judgment, the district court ruled in favor of the committee, and in an order dated July 1st, 1980, the court enjoined the committee from implementing Rule 11.4b, but suspending the imposition of the injunction until after the adjournment of the National Convention. Meaning they could do it, but they're going to have to do it next time around, not this time. Now, also, there was another case that year, subsequent to the filing of the briefs, and this is important to us, but prior to the oral argument, the Supreme Court handed down its decision in Democratic Party of the United States versus La Follette. Although the controversy in La Follette was not of one man, one vote variety, we believe the court's decision therein respecting the constitutional rights and protections afforded to political parties is of potential significance and deserves to be carefully scrutinized and argument by the parties to this case. There, the Democratic National Party indicated that it would not seat its 1980 convention the delegates selected in accordance with Wisconsin's open primary law. The National Party preference could not participate in the delegate selection process. The court held that Wisconsin could not constitutionally compel the National Party to seat a delegation chosen contrary to these rules. Although the factual context and issues represented in La Follette did not precisely coincide with those here, the court used broad language to that effect. A political party's choice among the various ways of determining the makeup of states' delegation to the party's national convention is protected by the Constitution. Oh boy. They've already ruled that the national parties, being albeit a national entity, is a extra private one and not subject to the laws of the land. Am I reading this right? That is established case law by the Supreme Court. I can't believe what I'm reading. Now, my memory card's about to freak out, so we're going to do a part 2. We're going to come back with Mr. Beck's response to Mr. Spiva and his ridiculous claims of not having jurisdiction to hear, and we're going to wrap this up. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video.